So where you from?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn defines who we are. If I go anywhere in the world, as soon as I open up my mouth, they know I'm from Brooklyn.
If you fancy yourself a creative and you feel like you have something to offer the world that's bigger than your town or your city, Brooklyn is it right now.
Brooklyn is so rich, such a rich community of creativity. That is ultimately what Brooklyn is to me, it's that diversity of culture and place.
We speak differently here. We walk differently here. We act differently here.
Since I was young, it's always been cool to say that you're from Brooklyn. Now more than ever, because Brooklyn is Brooklyn.
What makes Brooklyn different than anywhere else in the world, I feel, is the diversity we have here. Whatever food you want to eat is here. Whatever language you speak is here. Whatever part of the world that you come from, not just the United States, you're gonna find a brother or a sister from your hometown here.
Here it's very diverse, very, very diverse. You can walk down the street and meet so many different type of people, from someone who's broke to someone who has a whole lot of money can actually be sitting in this bar, having a conversation, and there's nothing different about any of them.
I hate to use the word tolerance, but you have exposure to people from a lot of different backgrounds.
It's got diversity, it's got art, it's got creativity. I think there's a lot of folks that are forward thinking. I think that's always been that way, but I guess we've been discovered a little bit.
Growing up in the project, it was more of, that's where you had the music, that's where you had the hip hop, that's where you had the Biz Marquies, that's where you had the Jay-Z's, the Biggies. It meant a lot growing up in the projects, to listen to people that were from the projects. I believe that it made Brooklyn more of what it is today.
As a rap fan, Brooklyn was Biggie. Brooklyn was, people literally standing on a street corner rapping, you know what I'm saying, kicking their verses.
Spike Lee, I think, played a huge role in almost internationalizing the name Brooklyn. I think part of the appeal, while we were always part of New York City, it always had its separate identity.
It's a mythological place where great people, great artists have come from and always can represent.
In 10 years, you go from cabs won't take you there to people acting like they're from, where you're from when they're not.
I think Brooklynites place a great premium on authenticity. And if there's one thing that New Yorkers in general don't care for, it's frontin'. People don't want to see that Brooklyn brand getting thrown around just for the value of it.
If your product or whatever you're using Brooklyn for isn't authentic, it's not gonna stick.
I think brand-wise, using it in the name now, there's a chance for some blowback from the originals. Brooklyn Beer, Brooklyn Bowl, Brooklyn Industries, it's great, it works, because people know they were real, and they were there first.
A lot of people, including lifelong Brooklyn people, question naming the beer Brooklyn. They said, the image is not so great, crime is really high, companies are fleeing, and I believed in Brooklyn. I mean, it seems to me one of these mythic places in the world.
Well, one of the only reasons why we even started roasting coffee on a larger scale was a good friend of mine. His dad lent us some warehouse space on Sunset Park. Just gave us, like a couple 100 square feet in the back of a warehouse to put in a 5-kilo roaster. We were roasting 6 pounds at a time, where we couldn't find any commercial space to let us roast coffee.
And everywhere I went, everybody was always new, this and that. It's like the neighborhood wasn't there anymore. So I decided to just do something called Brooklyn Eats on Myrtle, more of a neighborhood spot, more where I can come from and see a lot of my old time friends and old and new.
Brooklyn Grange was intrinsically designed to be a triple bottom line business. We really try to be faithful to our mission of respecting all 3 Ps, and that's people, the planet, and of course profitability.
Brooklyn was a major brewing center. In the late 1800s, there were 45 breweries, and when we started Brooklyn Brewery, we wanted to connect with that tradition. So our first beer, Brooklyn Lager, is based on the beers that were brewed back in the heyday.
It was very, very slow. I mean, people tend to think that it was some sort of instant success. It's like the instant 20-year, hard slog success. I kind of feel like that's the story of Brooklyn too. Like, it didn't happen all at once.
There's kind of 2 schools of makers in Brooklyn. There's the old school makers, people who've been around for a very long time, and they have a means and a way of doing business that has worked for them for many, many years. The same spirit that got them going is what's happening with this kind of new wave of Brooklyn makers. And I really think there's a great opportunity for those 2 worlds to come together more often than they do, to learn from each other in how to be smart and savvy in what you're making and how you're making it.
I feel really proud of what we've done to kind of create a vibe. And that's a bunch of things. That's the physical kind of aspects of the space, but it's also the staff, how you treat people, the energy you put off, the staff puts off the security. Like the back of our Brooklyn Bowl security shirts, it doesn't say security, it says welcome.
I think that sense of community, that sense of human contact is becoming important because we're getting so far removed from it.
GG, global gentrification. And the thing about gentrification, which is not talked about often, is where did people go that leave? What makes a city vibrant, from my opinion, is the young artists that come wherever you are and they cultivate the city and learn and, innovate. But people can't afford to live there, and they're not coming.
My fear is that we'd start losing that flavor, that real, you call it the mom and pop shop, you call it the local independent, whatever it is, that's starting to shift already very quickly. But I also know that there are people that are really fighting hard to hold on to that.
It's the positive and negative. Of course, we like to see things get better. We like to see the new restaurants, the new boutique shops. If you grew up here and you knew what it used to be, you feel the brunt of that. The less fortunate people or the lower income or even middle class are forced to leave. They can't afford to be here anymore.
The heart of it, the working class nature of it, is being erased. The Brooklyn pride that I think a lot of people are running around with now, it's a little bit different. It's trendy. As much as it's a wonderful place now, I don't want Brooklyn to lose that.
There are more jobs in Brooklyn today, a lot more jobs than there were 20 years ago. There's a lot more opportunity. This wave of entrepreneurship that's happening now is kind of a return to the roots of Brooklyn.
Doors are open for everybody. Old school, new school, because at the end of the day, when they're in here and they're talking about Brooklyn and they're talking about the way things used to be, I think that that's what makes this place. It's a lot of history here.
I feel like Brooklyn has a continuity to it, whatever it's been over the centuries at this point. Kind of gives everybody a common story.
There's something about Brooklyn that inspires you. You can go see people following a dream, trying to make their dream. And that's something that's sparks you, that makes you feel like you could do it.
It's amazing how everyone can live, you know, together in Brooklyn. The majority of the time, I'm not going to say that it's, you know, it's utopia in Brooklyn, but the majority of the time, it don't matter where you're from. It matters where you're at.